Hi, my name is Mark and welcome to the channel. Things look a little bit different because this room is currently under construction. If you've been here with me on the channel, you'll know that previously I changed up my crafting room, my crafting space here where I film, and I'm doing that for the second time. So I'll have a future video where we show off the completed project, but for today, I wanted to sit down and show you my pegboard storage situation. We're going to put one up together and talk about putting yarn up, effective ways to store it, and other precautions I take to keep all of my fiber and all of my supplies safe and ready for crafting. If you're interested in spending some time with me, stick around and let's get into it. So today's video is really just focusing on the pegboard setup for yarn storage. When I first had a little bit of space in this guest room in the house, I thought, let me look for pegboards and try to put something up so I can have a little bit of vertical storage for some of my yarn. So we'll break that down. It's very inexpensive to do, and I've been happy with the solution. So let's talk about how to get it set up. First things first, we've got our supplies. I have these that I'm using as spacers. I'm sure I could use something else that's actually meant as a spacer, but I never know what I'm looking for and how to find my way around when I'm in a big box sort of tool supply store. So I went to Lowe's, I picked up 2-inch long screws. I picked up spacers, what I'm using as a spacer, that are about a 1/2 inch, and my pegboards. I bought 2 pegboards. They're each 2 feet by 4 feet. That was the size that they came in. I kind of want to cut one down into a 2 by 2 to fill in another spot in the room. But this is what I've got. And it was about $10 for the pegboard. And I spent probably $3 total on my screws and what I'm using as spacers. We just want something behind the pegboard so that when you insert the pegs that will hang, they have space to sit behind the pegboard. So I found that these spacers gave me enough space for that. Here's the pegboard tucked behind the door. Initially, I was going to relocate this pegboard and have it next to the other one that I'm rehanging, but there's space behind the door, and I thought that's perfect. So I have 4-inch long pegs on this pegboard, and they fit behind the door easily without obstructing that door from opening. So I keep caked yarn, partial skeins, anything that's already wound on this pegboard. Now for the second pegboard, I'm going to try to hang my intact skeins or hanks, and I'm using longer pegs here. These are 8-inch long pegs, which will allow me to hang 2, 3, sometimes 4 skeins of yarn front to back and get a lot more yarn up on the wall. Now, before I get off track and distracted by something else, a note about these pegs, and I'll make sure to drop another clip in here. I found these pegs on Amazon. I'll put the links to them in the description of the video, and they have bulbed tips. They are not sharp, so I don't risk the yarn getting caught or split or torn, or my hands, if anybody were to be in this room and bump into the pegboard. The ends of these pegs are very blunt. They're rounded and smoothed, so I thought they were perfect for hanging yarn and having in this craft space. So make sure if you are doing pegboard storage that you find pegs that have some sort of blunt tip that won't rip up your yarn, but also won't cause a risk to anybody that's going to be in the same area with your storage. So I'm a big fan of this vertical storage solution. I don't have a lot of wall space in this crafting room, but this doesn't take up too much space. I mean, I'm using 4 feet wide between the 2 pegboards. They're each 2 feet wide, and I'm able to store a lot of yarn. If you don't have a depth issue, you could use 8-inch, 10-inch, 12-inch pegs and fit a lot of yarn. If you do have a depth issue, like a door opening or other furniture in the room, you can use 4-inch pegs and still fit a couple of hanks or wound skeins on the wall. I think my favorite part of storing my yarn on these pegboards where it's visible, where it's out in the open, is that I'm reminded of what I have. It's much easier for me to consider a pattern when I find a great pattern or I'm inspired to make something. I can really easily look and see how much I have of each color, of each weight, and I've organized them here by weight as well. For me, this just keeps my stash moving. I'm more likely to use things, they're at the front of my mind, and I get rid of them faster. A couple of notes for storing yarn out in the open. First is sunlight. I've made sure that the pegboards I have are not in direct sun. They're not getting a lot of sunlight because if you keep things you've made or fiber that's waiting to be used in too much sunlight, eventually the colors will fade. And I don't want that to happen if it's not purposeful. So I've put my pegboards in a part of the room where they're not getting too much direct sunlight. The next thing about storing yarn out in the open is to be mindful of pests. So I've heard tons of horror stories. I've seen firsthand the damage of moths. Thankfully, I've never had a moth infestation that I know of, clothes moths, with my fiber. And I do a couple of things to help prevent that. One is to use a spray that is a moth deterrent. This is an SLR moth deterrent that I bought at the Container Store. You can also get it online. The other thing I do is I put these discs out in closets, at the top of bookshelves, wherever I have wool, cotton, natural fibers stored in my house. So in some of the closets where I keep clothes, here in the craft room where I keep yarn, I put these discs out whenever they need to be replenished. I just have a big supply of them down in the basement. I got sort of an industrial pack once upon a time, and they seem to help. So either I'm lucky and the moths haven't chosen me, or the things I'm doing are helping to deter them. So either way, if you have yarn stored out in the open, even in drawers, even in bins, make sure you're doing something to help check in on its state. And if you find yourself in a situation where you're worried about pests or you've had an infestation, do whatever you can to help get that cleaned up and keep them away for the future. I'm in my casual clothes. I'm going to go back to putting together some more furniture, trying to get this room settled, and hopefully the next time you see me, I will be in a beautifully organized crafting space. As always, thank you for spending a bit of time with me. If you have recommendations, suggestions, questions, please leave them in the comments below. I'm always really happy to learn from what you have to say. Happy knitting, happy crocheting, happy crafting to you, and hopefully I'll see you in the next one. Bye.